Hello, everybody. It's Mike Hattery. I'm from Everybody Hates Cleveland, talking to Nino Colla, good friend of mine, also from Everybody Hates Cleveland on the Tribe Daily. At EHC, we've previewed pretty much everything you can about the Indians this offseason, and there will be more coming. So now we're going to kind of preview Indians fans to the fans, because that makes a lot of sense. And we're talking a little bit about sort of the misguiding role that the Cleveland media has in making it tougher on the Indians in terms of their public image. So how you doing, Nino?
Oh, I'm well. How are you today?
I'm quite well. I'm quite well. Uh, just relaxing a little bit. So you wrote a really fun piece about, I don't know, 3 weeks ago now, where we had polled a bunch of fans who wanted to see the sort of sociological makeup of the Cleveland Indians and what makes them tick. What is it
Yeah.
about the everyday fan that, sort of likes to scream at the man, likes to scream at the Indians, and likes to scream at the front office?
I just think they don't. I think most of them don't understand. I think most of them have been misguided. I think most of them have just this perception of the team that has just grown and grown over the past few years since they've rebuilt and since they've had this regime of ownership and front office and management. And it has gotten to a point where there's, I think, a few sections of fans. You have a really small pocket where they understand the situation, they understand where the team is and how they have to operate and how the climate, at least financially, both in Cleveland, both in Major League Baseball works. And they understand how the team has to operate and they get it. They still disagree, they still have their issues, but they understand and they're willing to see how this plays out, to see how the team operates, as long as they make sound and logical moves. And then you have the large majority of Cleveland, at least in terms of a fan base, that is miserable and just will continue to feed off anything that they perceive to be cheap, or the team is just trying to get to a point where they can trade people, or they don't really care about winning. All sorts of different narratives that have been perpetuated for years now, whether it's through the media, whether it's through just talking at the water cooler, or anything like that, that has just fed into this idea and this ongoing narrative that the ownership is cheap, or that the front office doesn't want to spend money, or that they're in love with prospects, or anything that you want to feed into. I think those are your kind of two pockets, and then from there, it obviously, I think, goes into subcategories. But generally, I think that's kind of where the fan base stands right now. And I mean, how we've gotten there is really interesting to me, at least, because it hasn't always been this way, but um, it it may be that way for a while, unfortunately.
Yeah, I want to talk about how we've gotten there, but I think first, I really like the sort of two separate camps thing, and I think a lot of it is on sort of reading and context lines. I think that you have a section of fans who are sort of interested. Um, you know, you're more in depth, more not in depth, but just certainly more invested. And you have the secondary class where, you know, reading about the Indians is something they do like 30 minutes a week. They don't have time to do this. They're working 55 hours a week. They have kids. All they read are a couple of blogs, maybe WFNY. They go read the Plain Dealer. They rely on Paul Hoynes because he's the beat writer and he's supposed to know what's going on. So I think there's this second pocket, and I don't necessarily think it's because these fans, necessarily are angry by nature, but I think it's one that's sort of fed. And talking about how they're fed is really interesting. I think we should probably go there.
Yeah, definitely. They are fed mainly by how you're you're saying there. It's interesting to me because I get it. You don't have time to read a whole lot of stuff that's out there, and there's a lot of stuff out there. There's a lot of good stuff. There's a lot of bad stuff. There's a lot of interesting stuff, but if you know where to look, you can find it. You don't have to rely on the same old stuff that's out there. It's the same old stuff of people that have fallen into their habits and their ways. And I mean, I'm someone who has, had his blog for, I don't know, what, 7 years now, 8 years, and I've never really done the same thing for too long of a period of time. I've never written the same way. I've never written the same things. And that's just how I choose to do things. It's because things have changed. It's also because I get bored. I like to do different things. Whereas, and I get it. I'm my own person. I have my own thing, but it just feels like a lot of the mainstream, a lot of the people that are looked upon as the holders of the information and the people that are supposed to relay the information are kind of in their own little rhythm there, and I think their rhythm is kind of out of touch, and it's again kind of helping feed some of those bad narratives.
Yeah, I think one of the really interesting things, I think Zach Meisel's done fantastic coverage for the Plain Dealer, and certainly I think has a bright future in terms of Indians coverage and really improving that at the Plain Dealer. But one of the tough things to watch has been, Hoynes, who's barely been out to spring training, sort of making snarky remarks about an organization that he doesn't particularly care to understand at this point in his tenure. And so you kind of have this thing where, I think probably 30 to 40% of Indians fans, rely on him as the sort of voice for what is, for information. And he's someone who's doesn't seem to be particularly tapped in at this point. I think it's really challenging, and I don't know how you change that. And, I think it's really unfortunate that the number one news source in an area doesn't seem to be overwhelmingly invested in providing really sharp information about the Indians.
I think I don't know how you change it either. I think one way to do that is to just get a new person. For a while, it was Hoynes and Sheldon Knocker who wrote for the Beacon Journal, and I'm not gonna bash a particular person. I know what the field is about. I know what those guys do. They work hard, but at some point, it's just kind of, all right. What are you doing? I mean, Sheldon Ocker retired a few years ago, and Ryan Lewis took over, and he's doing a really good job. And it's funny because I got some flack from Jordan Bastion, who I think is, he's done a really good job since he's taken over for Anthony Castrovins for Indians.com. But I got some flack because and most of the stuff that I say on Twitter is like me amplified to 10%. I wouldn't call Hoynesy stupid to his face. He's not stupid. I'm just joking around. But I got some flack for calling him stupid. And the response was, he's a legend. Okay, great. He's a legend. But this is kind of like, what have you done for me lately? And lately, he doesn't even know that Michael Brantley is the left fielder on the Cleveland Indians. He called him the right fielder. It's just something simple as that, is like how, making a mistake is one thing, but it's just a period of mistakes. It's just continuous mistakes, misinformation, things that are not, are just not true, or it's just broad in general, and it's not really giving you a lot. And I'm talking in circles here. How do you change it? I think you change it by getting new people that are kind of a little bit more hungrier than your legends who have been there for a while, and people that have a little bit more of a different insight, people that, not just to say that, oh, analytics are the way to go, or people that are using stats here and there. Just people that like Zach, who just, they do a good job. They're into it. They have all different aspects that they look at, and they could see things from different points of view, but can also just kind of take a step back and give me the facts, and that are kind of in touch, I guess, with journalism nowadays, and working in this newer landscape of media.
Yeah, I think there's there's this misconception that, if there's, I'm obviously analytics friendly. I love it. And I think that, I think kind of the future of reporting will intertwine it a little bit. And that's sort of where we're going. But I think probably the best Cleveland media piece written, I think, in the last year was when Mizell wrote about the life of the minor leaguer. He did a really fantastic 3-part series, which was just, strong reporting, really invested in telling a story. And I think he's someone who is not rested on, existing sort of on his legend status. And I think you see a lot of really solid writers like Mizell. And I think Bastian does a great job. I think sometimes Bastian's unfairly branded as being a little bit of a sort of mouthpiece for the Indians. And in some ways in that role, you have to be. But I think he does a fantastic and very fair job for the organization. But, I think there is this sort of transition that's going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years, where I think the sort of Hoynes and Pluto, who I think, Pluto is someone who first got me interested in sports writing. I mean, I read him every Sunday morning from when I was like 13 years old and older. And now I get a little frustrated. I won't lie.
Yep.
And he wrote Dealing, which is one of my favorite books I've ever read. But I think, there's this sort of point where what they're providing isn't particularly connected to the team. And a lot of times I read it and I think it's just downright deceptive to fans who kind of want to understand what the Indians are doing. And that's where it gets frustrating. Anyway.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely on point there. I think a lot of them. Pluto's another one, and I'm not, again. Those guys are there for a reason, and they've been there for a long time doing what they do because they're really good. Like you said, I too grew up on Terry Pluto. He was the reason that I got into just this area, and he's the reason that I wanted to be a sports journalist. But he and Hoynes and up until he retired, Ocker were kind of those guys that they kind of embodied that persona and that joke that I sometimes use, where they're stuck in the 90s Indians fan, because they very much are. They're someone who just has this idea of how it used to be and how it used to be run and what the 90s were. And oh, how great would that be if it was again? And that's not coming back. It's not ever coming back. That way of a team operating like that, and just that lightning in a bottle that team caught is not coming back. But their coverage of the team acts as if it still is that way, or it still could be that way. And that kind of, again, perpetuates a lot of how fans feel and how a lot of fans act and perceive this team to be, that they can do that sort of stuff. It's just that they don't want to, or they're not willing to, or that, the ownership doesn't care to do that because, well, we did it before. Why can't we do it again?
So, I think this is like I think when you're talking about the Indians and the sort of media perspectives on the Indians, it's a tough conversation to have in that, is there a lot of optimism? Is this, I think there are some ways in which the perception that the media has created on the Indians has a sort of, not insignificant effect on attendance and sort of how the city's invested in the roster. You have a really competent roster that's going to probably guaranteed be over 500. I would bet my savings it's going to be over 500 for the 4th straight season. And we're going to probably be 28th in attendance. Is something going
Yeah.
to change in the next few years, or is this, the new reality?
Boy, I don't know. I mean, you think that I look at some other fan bases that have kind of been in those periods here, like Kansas City and Pittsburgh, who have now kind of recently taken under some success, and just kind of as they've done that, the the fans have started going back out to those ballparks. PNC for years since they built it, and the Pirates were in the midst of those consecutive losing seasons. What that park was probably one of the most wasted spaces in Major League Baseball. It's such a beautiful park. It's such a great place to go watch a ball game. But fans were not going because the team was not winning. You look now, like I mean, that place every Sunday is just it's the place to be. I mean, with all the stuff that Pittsburgh has going on and the things that you can do in that city, that's where you want to be on a Sunday or even on a Saturday, even a Friday night. I mean, still you go there on the weekdays and there's people there, but you go there on a Sunday and that park is filled. They've got a party out on the streets. You've got people tailgating baseball games in Pittsburgh. And I look at that and I think to myself, like, if a team like Cleveland, who has kind of had their own issues, and it's been a while since we've had a quote unquote losing season. It's a season that has been just horrific and bad, and you don't want to go to the park. That's that's a team that should be 28th in attendance, a team that's not winning, a team that, like up until last year, is the Houston Astros, where you're just putting people out on the field. Like that's a 28th attendance team. That not what Cleveland has been doing in terms of on the field product. You could talk about the economics of a city. It's the fans just don't care. Because it's not economics. Because if it was economics, then the Browns wouldn't get into any people going to their games. The Cavs wouldn't be filling out the arena. I mean, you look at the Cavs when LeBron left. They weren't filling up the queue. This is a football town, so even though the Browns are bad, they're going to go see football games regardless. But even then, towards the end of the season, like you couldn't give a ticket away to the Browns game. You could go on StubHub and find them for super cheap. So I think that I don't know what it is. This is something that I've racked my brain for. I can't figure out why. And if the Indians were to ever get, I mean, we've seen it when they go into the postseason. That park is packed and people are there, and it's a great energy and it's a great feel and it's a great environment to be in. But consistently throughout the season, I don't know what the team has to do to get a fan base to go to the games and be something higher than 28 than attendance. And that, I mean, for the results that we've been getting the past few years, 28th in attendance is pretty pathetic in my eyes. I think it's kind of sad. And I get it for a lot of people, but you know at some point it's like, where's everybody at? Where's the support?
I guess the really scary thing to me is, I could see a team that sort of has overachieved in parts, or one that has a roster that, isn't particularly compelling, but they get positive results. They're just over 500 or whatever. But I think when you look at this rotation, you see, Kluber, who's one of the five best pitchers in baseball, and Carrasco and Salazar aren't far behind. 3 out of every five starts, you're watching guys who could go out and throw a no hitter.
Yeah.
It's not, the bang for the buck is even more impressive in terms of, you're watching sort of elite talents, and you have, a former MVP candidate in left field. You have Lindor, who is one of the 5 or 6 sort of future faces of the game right now. And they're still struggling to get attendance with, decent sort of outputs in terms of their actual winning percentage. So I think the really scary thing to me is, you have this sort of star heavy team, with incredible talent that you won't see around very often. I think we're going to look back at this rotation with Kluber, Carrasco, and Salazar and really, miss it and be wowed by what we saw for 3 or 4 years. And not many people are going to, have been in the ballpark to see it, which is really unfortunate. I guess, do we have to go to a league championship series to get people back to the park for a couple of years? Do we have to make a, win a playoff round to get people back to the park for the next year?
I don't even think that you're going to get them to the park for those games, and you're going to sell out the home opener, and those Friday, Saturday, you'll get well attended games, maybe more so now, maybe more so if that were to happen. But I think when it comes down to it, this is not a baseball town, and as long as there's other sports like football around, the Indians are always going to be second or third fiddle. That's just the reality of it. Even if they were to be a perennial winner, I think more fans would get behind them and start going to more games. But I don't think it would be anything drastic. I don't think it would be a seismic shift in sort of seeing, okay, we're 28th and now we're like top 5 in attendance, where you're filling up the ballpark every other night, and dare even bring up 455 consecutive sellouts. That'll never happen again, at least not in Cleveland. So I think some consecutive winning seasons in terms of going to the playoffs and going to some championship games, maybe. I think you'll get a little bit of a shift, but I think when it comes down to it, this isn't a baseball town, and you're not going to get those. And overall, I mean, granted, again, to bring up Pittsburgh, they're not a quote unquote baseball town. That's a football town through and through, but they are a sports town in general. And I don't know, as much as Clevelanders love their sports, I don't know if it's an all like, okay, all 3 of these teams we're all in no matter what, sort of a deal, because I think, again, it's just the makeup of the people in the city and the surrounding area is just very meh. They're not really winning. I'm not gonna go see them, or I got some other stuff to do. I think I'll just watch from home on this particular day.
Yeah, the watch from TV thing, I have to admit, is sort of, I don't know. That's how I grew up watching them, and so I find, as someone who's sort of a transplanted Clevelander now, I think one of the coolest things that I enjoy doing is I love, driving. Whenever I drive downtown now, I get to drive by the park, which is something that really I only was connected to listening to the radio and watching until I was about 22. So it's somewhat humorous to me, since I've been sort of transplanted here, listening to people who are like, I'll show up in July if they're good or whatever, and it's kind of funny. It's just very different to me. It's something I haven't grown accustomed to, as someone who isn't from around here. But it does seem to have that sort of apathetic, if they win 10 in a row, I'll show up on the 11th. If not, So that's really different. I want to get back to, I guess another question. Do we ever see them make the top 15 in attendance again? Or is that door closed? Is this like maybe we get 25,000 a game for a couple of years and we get really excited about that?
Gosh, I don't know. I guess it would depend on the landscape in general of baseball. And again, yeah, those you got to string. I think you have to string a few of these seasons together where it gives some of those people that are like, I'll show up when you win a championship, sort of a deal. That excuse just it blows me away, though. It's like, well, I'll show up when they win a few games. It's just I grew up, like you said, you grew up, watching and listening to the radio because, not being from in the area. I grew up with my dad having season tickets in just the era that was gunk and we were rebuilding, and the blueprint was being first put together and drawn up, and the initial stages of it when Mark Shapiro was trying to accumulate talent in the minor league system. So I went to the ballpark watching talent like Alex Escobar in the outfield every day. So, and that was me going to games and sitting through some of that stuff. So when I hear that, I'm just like, yeah, whatever. Yeah, I mean, kind of what you were saying, like the talent that's on the field right now, just in the pitching staff alone, where you're going to get more times than not, you're going to see someone out there that is going to throw a good game. Maybe they're going to throw a clunker in here or there, but Jason Davis is not on the mound. Billy Traber is not on the mound. Those were some names. Those were some, you never knew what you were going to get when you went to the ballpark. Now, you know, you're at least going to, you have a good percentage chance of seeing something good when you go to those games. So yeah, it's funny to me that those people come up with those excuses. And to answer the question, I don't know. I don't think, again, unless you string some stuff together, I don't think this team is ever going to, at least for the foreseeable future, hit that 15, that first half of Major League Baseball in terms of attendance. I just, again, don't think that this town is built for that anymore, at least in terms of psychology and kind of where their allegiances lie, and just kind of, like you said, their apathy towards it all.
Yeah, I think sort of humorously, one of the worst things that happened to the Indians was when LeBron came home again. I think there was this sort of window that opened for the Indians with a really competitive young roster, with a good future, to sort of take over an audience when the Cavs were absolutely magnificently terrible for 3 or 4 years. The Browns were their stable, magnificently terrible selves. And I think that door was kind of open, and LeBron came home, and I think there is an attendance overlap. You know, there is an opportunity cost for the Indians when the Cavs are really good, and it may not be huge, and there may not be a lot of crossover. But the hottest ticket in town in Cleveland through June right now, it's going to be a Cavs ticket. It's not going to be an Indians ticket, which definitely, you know, it hurts them. I don't know. I don't know where else to drive where we're going. So I'll have to, you know, leave, you know, anything you wanted to talk about, you know.
I just get depressed when I think of, like, just to kind of go back on this, that I'm not a basketball fan, and for the city of Cleveland, the fact that he came back, that's great. I love it. That's awesome. I want, as a whole, as much as I think some fans are insufferable and miserable and just want to live that way, if LeBron ends up bringing home helps the Cavs bring home a championship, great. That's awesome. But I was kind of like in that, like, I'm really jealous mode. Like, I don't want it to be LeBron. I don't want it to be the Cavs. I want it to be the Indians. Just to say, like, in your face, that this is the team that brought a championship to the city. So you need to go out and support them, sort of a thing. Here's something that I wrestle with a little bit, though. So the Browns are kind of going into this more analytic sort of a front office with some of the things that they've done. And based off some of the moves, it seems like they're going to go through their own little bit of a rebuild. Do we think that sort of attitude and that mindset of kind of how a Cleveland Indians fan operates right now, do you think that if the Browns kind of do what they're going to do and go into this rebuild, do you think maybe that they're going to get a little bit of a taste of their own, I guess, medicine, if you will, where they have to live through this with their beloved football team?
I kind of hope they have to. You know, I think that's a great point. You know, if you look at what's happening in Philadelphia now, and I keep comping the 76ers situation sort of the Browns one, but I think this looks like a situation where the Browns are just going to dump 2 or 3 seasons where they're going to be, plan to be the worst team in the league for 2 or 3 straight years instead of try not to be one of the 2 or 3 worst teams. I think that's going to draw them a lot of flack. And I think I have really similar feelings to you, which are kind of weird. I'll admit that winning a title with LeBron, winning a Cavs title just does not mean that much to me. And I actually, in some weird ways, root against it. I hate the notion, and it may just be because I'm conditioned to this like Antonetti and Shapiro thing, but I hate just being that team that goes from the worst team in basketball and then brings in LeBron and Kevin Love in 3 weeks, and all of a sudden we're a title contender. And I love, watching an organization grow and following these guys. And I've loved minor league baseball, and I know you do too. And I think, sort of like watching Santana since 2011, watching Salazar break through and figure it out, hopefully watching Bauer kind of make the leap. All these guys, I think the process of watching the winner sort of mature and come out of the cocoon is something that I really enjoy. It's something that I want for that first Cleveland title to be in 60 years. And I don't want it to be one that we bought, like the Yankees buy a title by bringing in 2 top 15 players in the league. So to me, I'm far more interested in an Indians title than anything else. And partially just because I've watched the sort of foundation be laid, and now I'd like to see where it goes.
Yeah, I think that's where we're at with a lot of. You watch a team like the Florida Marlins when they've won their 2 World Series titles. That's what they did. They just brought in people and things worked out, and then they just sold them off. And that's really. I used to be a big basketball fan. I loved watching the NBA. I loved. It was kind of 1B to 1A of baseball for me. I was not a Cavaliers fan. I actually grew up being an Orlando Magic fan, and that was kind of fun to watch that process. They went from a team that wasn't really good, drafted a few players, watched them develop and grow over a period of time, and then kind of add some of those pieces to make them a contender. And from drafting Dwight Howard and Jameer Nelson, and then getting to a point where they were adding players, and then they make this run for a few years where they were really good, and they went to the finals, and kind of at the Cavs' expense there for a while. And then the NBA started to go into this direction where they were adding those teams that, all right, well, we're just going to add 3 or 4 superstars, and the NBA every year is just basically going to be four or so teams that are it's either them or no one, based off our big 3 or our big 4 or who we've added. And to me, that's not fun. To me, I don't care about that. That's where basketball kind of lost me. And that's why I like baseball, because you have your teams like the Yankees and the Red Sox and the Dodgers where they're going to add pieces, but you can do that and still not win, as we've seen. And watching what's happening in Cleveland and seeing, as you said, the process kind of play out, to me, is what's fun. And I think that's at the core of it, the issue. I think that's where you lose a lot of people. I think a lot of people want that instant gratification. They want to win, and they want to win now. And I get it in a city that hasn't won a championship in so long, how they want it now. They want it as quickly as possible. But to me, how much greater will it feel? How much better will it taste if it happens going through a process like what Cleveland has gone through, and seeing kind of it all pay off? To me, I think is a lot more entertaining and a lot more fun, and a lot more exciting to be a fan in that regard, is to watch something like that play out in your favor.
I love that. So I think, ultimately I have nothing to add to that, and we've rolled on for a little time here. So I'm going to close it out. let Nino get back to packing. So
Uh,
this is Mike Hattery from Everybody Hates Cleveland. That was Nino Colla, the wise one. Have a good night, and we'll have more podcasts coming soon.